In 2008, I was watching YouTube Live, and I'm like, this is the coolest shit I've ever seen. Don't get discouraged. It's very easy to get discouraged, especially if you see someone that's been scratching for 10 plus years, whatever, and they're doing really well, and you're like, I'll never get to that level. It's like, well, don't say that. That's just shooting yourself in the foot. Like, you just practice.
How's it going, peeps? Dupes here. Today I've got a special treat for you because we're chatting to DJ Dopez, who is one of my favourite scratchers. We talk about all sorts in the interview, and I've tried to keep it as succinct as possible. But if you're interested in hearing a longer version of the interview, please drop a comment and I will release that at a later date. Big ups, Dopez. Thanks so much for coming on and contributing to my channel. If you don't know about him, you really need to go check out his channel. He's got some wicked tutorials on there and just like loads of scratching videos and really cool stuff. Anyway, let's get into the interview.
Well, why not? Why not? This is great content. This is Basil. He actually just got me bad, but it's all love. It's all love with this little one. First time I ever saw turntablism was in 2008. I was watching YouTube Live with Mike Realm, and I remember being so engrossed by it. I don't know what it was, but something awakened. And I'm like, this is the coolest shit I've ever seen. I got turntables in August of 2010. It was my 16th birthday. I posted my first freestyle, I think probably like a good year after that. So 2011, I posted it to DV and everyone was like, yo, like, who is this kid? What do you mean you've only been scratching for a year?
This is when you were called Circuncision, right?
Yes, it was. Yes,
yeah,
that terrible name. But I want it to be edgy. I want it to be memorable. And I'm like, you know what? That's pretty. You don't forget something like that, And I obviously I was the butt end of many a joke, and I roll with it. I think it's fine. I mean, it was just a stupid ass name that I came up with. So around 2011 to 2012, I remember that's when DMC really started pushing the online stuff, and that's when I figured out, oh, I want to have Lajad produce routines for the DMC online, because that's what appears to be winning or doing well, because this is like off of the uncut win. So I figured, okay, I have to go super fast and do 2-click flares over it because that's what everyone else does. And so like my very first DMC online was probably 2012. One of the titles of those videos is like no music, F+, because everyone would always say that, oh, this isn't musical, this is no good, it's too fast. And I'm like, what? You're not listening to it right. I mean, looking back at it, I know what they're saying now. But back then I was like, no, it's just advanced. You guys this is just French style. This is just electro style. It's the new wave.
So early on, you were battling, right?
One for the trouble, two for the bout. One for the trouble, one for the trouble, one for the trouble, two the bass. You know the tip. It's time to flip this.
So do you think that has something to do with how quickly you progress?
Yeah. No. It definitely helps because that was my first time playing for a crowd, figuring out what people want to hear, what gets people going, what gets the oohs and the ahs. Because obviously going from a bedroom to going to a live stage with an audience, it's completely different. Like there's so many variables that you don't account for in the bedroom when you can film multiple takes and it's like, okay, oh, that one didn't go well, I'll just do it again. It did help in my progression, just putting together routines, using the mixer's effects and controls to like quickly switch, switching the songs in Serato even. Because I know some DJs that would just have a, one big like 4-minute file for A and one big 4-minute file for B. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that because then if one of your cues starts slipping, then the whole routine gets compromised. So I always knew you had to split it up into tracks. I'd say the battles helped me if anything, more on a producing aspect of it. Most of my production was on Audacity. I know now that everyone uses Ableton, and they set their clock to 133 so that it lands on the the clock, the grid. I didn't know that. I was just kind of spitballing it. I'm like, okay, but I did also learn about like what kind of scratches to do. Like, I learned the difference between power scratches and like flowy like mixtape scratches, if that makes sense. I had the clicks, but I didn't have the flow. That was what I wanted to develop next. I remember like just listening to like Switchblade so many times. I still listen to it so many times because I'm like, this is still some of the best scratching I'll ever hear. And I remember just having to like really analyzing it and being like, what makes it so good? How does he know where to pause it? How does he know when to go double time? When does he know when to not go double time? I'm like, what records is he using? What turntable is he using? What is up? I just remember like listening to it so many times and just being like, you know what? I need to really slow down and do this style of scratching. They call it the drunken monk style. I mean, I would always listen to the Ruck clip of him at Night at the Knitting Factory when he's cutting over the like ba 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 ba. I was like, that's what I need to do. I need to do the super slow, like funky transform. You're doing a lot of scrapes, even a lot of drags and scrapes. And then you do a quick, you do a quick 2-click in the middle of all that slowness. And I'm like, that sounds cool because there's all that variation. And that really makes it, I guess the whole point is, makes you think. It makes you think. It's not just busting a 2-click flare for eight bars at the same timbre, same rhythm, same pace. When you're scratching that slow compared to like in a sea of people going as fast as they can, everyone's like, what is this guy on? But I kind of fuck with it. No one else I knew was into turntablism at all. So I was always fiending for information and, doing all the research online. I mean, I read about like Phonics and all the drama with Ricky Rucker from 2002 and 2003 and 2004. And I'm like, man, this is so before my era. But I feel like with all the research that I've done and reading all the old posts, I feel like I was like a part of it in a way. Post a file, bitch. I feel like I resonate with that online culture. When it comes to like the Scratcher net, I wanted to learn everything about it. I wanted to learn all the lore about like turntablism and scratching in the early noughts. And I was like, that was just me wanting to know everything there was. And I feel like that probably had something to do with, the fact that I was able to pick it up so quickly because I mean, I guess I did my research. I tried to learn everything there was.
How much were you practicing?
Oh, a lot.
Like
a lot.
Can you give it like an average a day or something?
Oh man, I don't want to. No, but I used to play a lot of video games online. I was really good at Xbox. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I was really good at Halo 3 and Call of Duty 4. Those were my games. Everyone called me a nerd in like 9th and 10th grade. And I was like, oh, you're like, that's the video game guy. He's really good at video games. And I hated it. I hated that. I actually won the superlative for most likely to stay up all night and play video games in my high school yearbook. And that was really embarrassing to me. I was like, you know what? I'm going to spend all my time that I spent gaming just scratching. I would get home from school. I would power on the decks at, 4 o'clock, and I wouldn't turn them off till like maybe 8 or 9. I would put on the Hubert lamb chops video and try to keep up with him. And in my brain, I'm like, oh, I'm totally keeping up with him. But like, clearly I obviously wasn't. But the biggest thing, I mean, everyone asks me, like, how did you learn? How did you learn? It's like, I always tell people, it was the DJ Angelo tutorials. I followed every single video one by one in the series. I think it took me like a month to crack the 2-click flare. I was like, oh my God, I'm like getting one step closer to it sounding the way I want it to sound.
Have you got any advice for new scratchers or people trying to get better? Just to, what would you tell them?
Don't get discouraged. It's very easy to get discouraged, especially if you see someone that's been scratching for 10 plus years, whatever, and they're doing really well. And you're like, I'll never get to that level. It's like, well, don't say that. That's just shooting yourself in the foot. Like, you just practice. There is no like get rich quick like scheme to it. It's literally just practice and listening to what you like. You have to listen to DJs you like, scratchers you like. Just study it. Just listen to it over and over, and just figure out what it is about what they're doing that you like, and trying to emulate it. Like, do what I did. Do as much research as you can. Like, look into like the Ever Scratch tutorial, or look into old files, or old like online DJ battles of people posting their files, and look at the critiques. Look at the critiques that people were giving each other. Because I remember, obviously, when I was young and I was like, I wanted to write off what everyone said. I'm like, no, they're wrong. That's not right. But then looking back on it, I'm like, they're right. Like, they're literally telling me how to get better. In terms of resources, I mean, shit, those Yoshi tutorials are really what, honestly, I remember struggling with my flow and watching like his critique video, his D-Styles video. Those helped me so much. I mean, I literally learned to scratch just off YouTube. And I always tell older DJs that, and they're like, man, we were listening to the boom boxes, and we were on our parents' fucking stereo system trying to figure out how to do, and I'm like, yeah, no, I don't have that. I did not struggle with that whatsoever. I literally watched a YouTube video of how to do a chirp, how to do a flare, and it was explained to me by like DJ Angelo in like the simplest way possible. Just start scratching. Just start going for it. Don't even you use some use a little guidance, follow the videos, whatever. If you got to buy the Qbert DVD, buy the Qbert DVD, Scratchlopedia, Breaktanica, or whatever. The biggest thing with DJing or scratching even is it's such a foreign feeling concept. You give someone a guitar and they kind of know what to do with it. They know what to hold the fretboard and strum it. You give someone a piano and they know kind of leave your hands on all the keys. You give someone a record and a turntable, and it's just like you might as well have cut off their hands and like told them to like make a coffee or something. Like, it is so foreign feeling. The idea of like, it's like, okay, well, now we're going to turn the platter on, and you want to hold the record steady while the platter spins freely underneath. And they're like, what does that mean? You look at turntablism in general, and it's like this art form literally came up literally as a complete like an accident almost. I mean, if we go by the Grand Theodore story, scratching is just back cueing in your headphones. It was never supposed to be heard out and about. When people started, using the fader to cut that sound on and off, everyone was like, wait a second, I think I can get something percussive out of this. It's funny, it started out so informal, and now there's formal training in classes and whatnot. And it's still a young art form, I consider. I mean, turntablism was like a product of the 70s. And I mean, we're not that disconnected from like the 1970s, as opposed to, stringed instruments or piano or plucked instruments like the piano. But I don't think it's peaked. People always say like, oh, scratching peaked in 02, 04. When you look at like digital technology, when you look at like, integration with Serato or mixers with more effects, and I feel like there's still stuff left to discover with it. Everyone has their different interpretations on flow, and their different interpretations on the same patterns that we're all used to. So the flow aspect of it is the hardest part to teach, because that is innately you, where that's really your musical background or the way you interpret rhythm and the way you interpret the pocket. That's the hardest part to teach. I mean, it is possible to teach that. It is possible with training and with, practice, but just to try to basically do like a one-size-fits-all formula for everyone. It's like, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to do. It is harder than it seems to explain that. The dexterity for the fader movement, that's that should be definitely that should be your obviously your weaker hand, because the fader is just an on-off. It's like a fretboard, It's like a fretboard on guitar. You're strumming, your bow playing, that's your record. That's your record hand. This is just your notes. This is just your on and off. For a fader, it's on and off. So, in grade school, I'm classically trained. I played the cello growing up. And I remember one of the things they told us was when you hold the bow for like a stringed instrument, they're like, just turn your hand over, and then the way your hand just exists, like when you turn it over, that's the best bow grip. And I always remembered that. For scratching,
just when you just turn it that way and
it's just turned that way, and your thumb is loosely on the fader, but it's not really pressing on it. It just exists kind of on it. so that when you're doing your clicks, your thumb resets it, but it leaves it popped open easily. You kind of want to leave your thumb kind of just like floating, but you don't want to be putting too much force on it when you're closing it, because then when you're straining it, then you obviously that's when you get sloppy. That's when you get the strain. It's all about just keeping it as loose as possible. I always say that I wish I learned to scratch right on the record, left on the fader, because it looks cooler. Your hands are closer together. You're kind of wide open when you got your left and you're doing your right on the fader. When you're scratching right hand record, left fader, you're closer together. It's like you're conserving more energy. Whenever someone does this stupid pantomime DJ wiki, you know, they put their hand up to their ear. Notice it's always left on the ear, right on the record. I'm like, they have it right. They always had it. Everyone that does that, oh, you like to DJ? You like to do, it's like, it's always the right hand. I'm like, you know what? That's how it should be. They're onto something. Or I don't know if you remember the QFO clan, those three guys, all Qbert clones, they were printing CCW records so that they could use their QFOs, but they can actually use them like this, scratching reverse. So they can have their left hand like closer to the fader as if they were scratching right, but they were scratching left. So they had to print their samples backwards. And obviously the QFO has a reverse switch so that you can play the sample that they sound forward when they're actually playing backwards.
So you learn both hands now, right? So have you found any benefits from that, or?
So I say I've been scratching left roughly about 7-8 years now. It's funny, when I DJ at the club, when I'm DJing and I'm mixing, I prefer mixing and blending records with my right hand still. Because I've noticed, like, if I keep my laptop on my right hand, it's easier to go from the pitch fader to the laptop to control Serato to select the next songs. And I don't know, when it comes to cueing and just dropping it on the beat, or just doing my general mixing, my blending, where you're pinching the spindle, or you're brushing the platter, it feels a lot better right-handed. I remember, like, in the Scratch Perverts video tutorial, like the VHS tapes uploaded to YouTube, when Prime Cuts is talking about switching to your left hand or to your right hand, he's like, I usually scratch left, but you know, I do try to do some things right, because sometimes there are some things that you can do right that you can't do left. And it's worth just discovering that, you know. But it is fun. It is useful. I remember Vect saying in like early DJ battle tutorials, he's like, you know, be ambidextrous. It helps with your juggling. If I'm in a real funk, if I get tired, I mean, sometimes I just get tired of scratching. Like anyone does, you know. You play a fucking looper for 45 minutes, and you're like, I'm over this. Like, I already tried scratching my left and my right. I'll be like, you know what? Let's just load up some doubles. Let's just load up some doubles and see where we can go with this. Sometimes I'll literally not scratch for like 2-3 days, and I'll only juggle, or I'll only try trick mixing. I'll only try to hone in on that skill. I mean, Vect is right. There are fewer resources than there are for scratching than there is juggling, and there's a lot left to, I guess, discover with juggling. Scratching, you're taking one sound, one note, or one clip, and you're manipulating it so many different ways. With juggling, it's all about your base material. With base material, with scratching is like one sample. With juggling, it's like a whole drum break. Like, I just remember, like, I'm like, oh, if I want to do DJ battles, you have to learn juggling. Like, it's just a part of it. It's just a part of turntablism. Because I know some scratch DJs that don't even bother like hooking up a second turntable and you know, trying to flip 2 doubles of some like 90s hip hop break or whatever. Like, when it comes to like DJing at a club, like, you don't want to beat juggle at a club. Like, people don't want to hear that. Like, if you're landing it right, no one can tell the difference. Their snares are still landing at 2 and 4. It's like, no, it doesn't matter. But if you mess up, oh, people are gonna notice very quickly that you're jumbled up. Like, you know, and that's kind of what it is to me. It's like a sideshow kind of magic trick. It's like, woo, look at what I'm doing with these beats. Whereas with scratching is just a lot more applicable. Like, but I do believe that juggling is important, just because it really gets you to focus on like where your kicks and snares are. You can make some crazy juggles that are so good that basically people always think of your juggle when they think of a song. Like, I think of like Clever's Ludacris, What's Your Fantasy Juggle from 2001. Anytime I hear that song, I'm like, man, Clever really fucked this record up. If scratching is like, you know, if scratching is 3D, then it's trying to explain beat juggling, that's 4D to someone, you know, just a regular naysayer.
Yeah. What do you think about portablism? You got a portable?
I do have a portable. Personally, this is not a good take. I don't care for it. I'm sorry, I just don't. I don't really. I feel like some DJs sound better on portables than they do on regular 12-inch records because it's less effort, it's less mass. You can really get down on those little portable turntables. It's a great practice tool. I mean, I love that, and also I love the fact that it was another dimension for exposure for the turntables community, which honestly is pretty stagnant. You know, you look at like the late 2000s, like 05, 06, 07, vinyl sales were at an all-time low. No one cared about turntables anymore. Turntablism came and went kind of as a fad of the 90s. You know, you'd always see commercials with like a DJ in it or some shit like that. But then it kind of really hit the back burner. And now with little help like portablism, it's like, okay, like people still scratch. People still like to, you know, do that funny sound that was so so nostalgic. Who I look up to the most when it comes to flow, I mean, now I'd say it's definitely like IQ or you know, the like Muzzle. Obviously, he's the one that everyone wants to be. Muzzle, I mean, he just makes it look. It's absolutely insane how easy he makes it look, because you can see in his wrist is completely relaxed, yet he's still knocking out all these clicks, all these crazy patterns, all these you know, his flares and his tears, and it just all looks so effortless. But the person that I'd say that I definitely took the most inspiration off of is definitely got to be DJ Enfo. Because when I went off to college freshman year, I was like in the middle of nowhere in Texas. But we actually added each other as friends on Facebook, and I would study his old clips from when he was doing like the CCF battles and whatnot. And I'm like, this guy's got everything that I like. He's got like the super balance between technical and the balance between like super groovy. He knows where the pocket, knows where to drag the record. He's cutting up these super fast syllables, double timed, and I'm like, that's what I want to learn. And that's when I figured out like a lot of what he's doing is the whip scratch. And I'm like, that's the secret, that's the sauce, that's the thing that I need to learn because I want to flow like him. The European guys that I looked up to were obviously like Nedic. But what's interesting is I think the reason I liked most of the French cats, even the European guys, was because Enfo did live in France. He would tell me about hanging out with like Mr. Victor when Victor was like a literal child. So I would always resonate with like those stories, and I always looked at their videos, like when they were doing the promos for Scratch Science and stuff like that, and they were, you know, they'd have a cigarette in their mouth and just busting a crazy flow. I'm like, yeah, that's so dope. French, yeah. So he tells me that he grandfathered that style. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he tells me that he basically showed them how to whip. One of the biggest takeaways that I remember getting from Chris was that Chris was scratching D-Styles records, like Gag Ball and STD breaks. I noticed that D-Styles records, I mean, sonically, he has the ear for what sounds great on a record. And his samples were always so beefy, like, and also he didn't kill the bass all the way. He's like to preserve some of the low end. And I always tell people, don't always kill the bass on your samples, because then they come out too tinny. You're missing out on a whole spectrum of sound. Because when you're doing those slow drags, you hear that meat in the sample, the bass, and I'm like, you don't want to miss out on that. That's some good. That sounds so good, like a slow drag on like, give it like a third of a turn, and that's it. You don't have to kill it all the way. My favorite awe is still the Super Seal awe. The Super Seal awe is a great awe. That's my favorite one. I mean, There's some that come close to it, but like the Super Seal beat to shit awe is my favorite one for some reason.
Oh, thank you so much, man.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no worries. I mean, this was an absolute pleasure. I mean, you know, I love telling people, I guess, my story, how I came up in this, whether they get inspiration from it or not. Like, sure, but I mean, all I know is that, I mean, I love turntablism, I love scratching, and just talking about it, just being given a chance to a platform to sit on my little soapbox and give my little 2 cents about what I've learned in the past like 10, 11 years.
And that's it for the interview. As always, please drop a like if you like the video. It helps the channel no end and it's free. And if you're interested, please join my Discord channel, which I'll put a link in the description. And it's a place for DJs, turntablist producers, people like that to go hang out and basically just, yeah, like, you know, make conversations about those things. Peace and carrots, y'all.